Hello there! Welcome everyone back to another episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy, watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. This is episode, and I can't believe I'm saying this, 40, episode 40 of Star Wars in a Galaxy. This week, we watched the Star Wars, the Clone Wars episodes, Senate Spy, Landing at Point Rain, and Weapons Factory. I'm Eli.
I'm Jacob, and today we have a very special guest with us, Alden Diaz.
He is the host of the great Star Wars podcast, Ahch-To Radio, and the author of many of the finest Twitter threads in the galaxy. So,
what's going on, my friends? How you doing? Happy to be here. Congrats on 40. Happy to be here on a nice round number episode. That's exciting.
Right. I didn't even realize that it lined up this way until I was putting together a schedule. I'm like, okay, yeah, we got 40 with. Yeah,
it works out.
It just works.
40 with some great episodes too. Yeah. So excited to revisit some early ones that I hadn't seen in a long time.
That's me with season 1. I'm like, oh, this was an episode. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do before we get into those episodes, though, we'd like to give a little background on our guests. So Alden, kind of a two-part question: how do you get into Star Wars? And then once you got into Star Wars, how did you become a Star Wars content creator on Ahch-To Radio and all that kind of stuff?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like we all sort of have that initial seed where, and I've said this, and I think the best way I can explain it is like you have those early fog memories where you're like, you see the images and and you kind of have to stitch them together in the most logical way, even though you can't factually know for sure like that's how it happened because you were so little. But I remember always kind of knowing of the original trilogy. I had the silver box set of the special editions, the VHS silver box set that had that nice slip and everything. And so that was always kind of around. But I remember seeing Phantom Menace on home video, and I had these two walkie-talkies. And one of the walkie-talkies, I think, were given to me by like my cousins or something, or a sister's friend or something like that. And one of them was a Stormtrooper helmet, and one of them was a Vader helmet. And I remember being like, I don't really care about the Stormtrooper. But I had this Vader helmet that I was so like just entranced with. And somebody told me when I was playing with it and watching Phantom Menace, they were like, you know that little boy is that helmet. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, how could he become this thing? That's not in the movie. I've seen this movie. Like, I know the end. Like, he's a kid. And that's when I was like, this is such a massive interconnected thing. And I was also in Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, which I still love those things. And I've always read comics. So I was used to big narratives. But this was the first time that, I think for a lot of us, this is true, that you were like, my parents know about this. My teachers know about this. Like, I had a kid in my kindergarten class whose name was Luke. And one day I just threw in a Skywalker. I was like, Luke Skywalker. And the kid didn't really get it because I don't think his parents had shown it to him. But my kindergarten teacher was like, oh, Star Wars. And so you were like, oh, everyone understands this, to a certain degree. And so that sort of drags you in, and you get, if you're like me and like you guys who I interact with you guys on Twitter, and you guys have built up such a good thing and a positive. And I think one of you I think Eli, you just went and kicked some ass in trivia.
Yep.
Not too long ago, just a couple weeks ago over with some of our friends. And so you have that hunger too, that I need more of this. I need to be satiated. I need to know what the big deal is. And so you start picking up reference books and, whatever you can get from the library, and, Jedi Apprentice. I remember the Jedi Apprentice, The Call to Vengeance, with Qui-Gon on the cover, just running out, with his like non-canon apprentice, Xanatos, I believe his name was like my first expanded anything. And then Knights of the Old Republic. And so I was just like all in, sort of pedal to the metal. Like, I need this always. And then I guess the second part of this is about the content creation side, which, is interesting in its own right, because I always knew I wanted to be in entertainment, almost primarily because of Star Wars, because Star Wars does that thing that a lot of franchises don't do, which is Star Wars made celebrities and characters out of the people that made Star Wars. So Star Wars kids, Like kids now growing up on Marvel, they might know who like Taika Waititi is and like things like that, but you don't know the names of every art director and puppeteer and concept artist and DP and producer. Not like Star Wars, where Star Wars was like all these legends. And so I wanted to work in entertainment, like, you know, like a Rick McCallum, like a Doug Chang, like a Gary Kurtz, like a Dave Filoni, who, you know, we'll get into. And I wanted to make films, and I still do, and I've written some stuff, and I wrote, you know, I did comic book reviews online and podcasting and different things. And then I became a professional broadcaster, and I work for iHeartRadio, and I produce radio here in South Florida. I produce morning shows, and I realized I had these resources, and I had done a Star Wars podcast before in high school, very casually. But then I was like, I can build something that's kind of like what I want to see. And there were people in the space that had stuff, you know, people that inspired me, like my buddy Ken Knapsack, who we all know and love from Force Center and other things, where I was like, there's a place where I can fit myself in, and doing like long form interviews. Obviously I haven't shut up since I started talking, so people will understand. But long form, like inside the actor's studio type interviews about Star Wars love, I was sort of like, no one's doing this, and at least no one's doing it in the way that I think I could. And really, you have to make the show that you want to hear, or else why are you doing it? You know, you can't chase trying to be, you know, what you can't try to be Jedi Council, you know, or anything that was like big on YouTube a few years ago, because all of that, as we've seen, burns bright and dies quick. You know, all those companies, it's about, if it ain't clicks, you know, we want it out of here. We're going to pivot. We're going to change. People losing jobs, gaining jobs. You have to make it because you love it, and because you love this. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Your Honor.
Great stuff.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing. That's very interesting. I was really struck by what you said, and I never really thought of it that way, how there's an aspect of Star Wars being almost universal. Mm-hmm. in certain ways. And I certainly know what you mean, how once I knew Star Wars, it felt like this is something that so many people know. It was kind of amazing that there are just so many people attacking it from so many different aspects and so many different angles, and just so many people like pouring their passion into it.
Yeah.
So I thought the next thing we'd do, Jacob and I thought we'd do the summaries a little bit different going forward. What we usually did was we did the summaries when the episode came up. So when the second episode, we did do the summary, then the analysis. But what we thought we'd do for this and all continuing episodes after this is we do all the summaries first, so then we can get into the analysis later. So, Alden, you're first. Senate Spy.
All right, so Senate Spy, ladies and gentlemen. These are season 2 episodes, so we're going back early Clone Wars. We'll get into this a little bit in the analysis, but tonally, Clone Wars was a little lighter back then. You know, that in comparison, especially to some of the stuff we would see in the last couple seasons. But in this episode, we are trying to pinpoint from the Jedi Council's point of view. We're trying to pinpoint this operation of new factories and new separatist conspiracies. And as the glorious narration at the beginning sets up for you, we need a spy. And Anakin Skywalker is coming home from a tour of duty, and he quite literally brings home what looks like a space pizza box. And so he comes home and he's like, "Hey, babe, like, how's it going?" And Padmé, you know, they're in love. They haven't seen each other in a while. This is the first time, notably, which we'll talk about, that Anakin refers to the apartment as his home. And so there's steps happening in their relationship. But, you know, duty calls, which is a theme of the episode. And so Anakin has to go respond to Obi-Wan Kenobi. He attends a council meeting where they say, we need someone to spy on this guy, Rush Clovis. And Rush Clovis, you know, has involved in the banking guild, clearly some separatist ties. And the Jedi casually are like, hey, we talked to Padmé. She said no. It'd be great if you could convince her. Padmé, none too happy with Anakin leaving, has to become the spy for the Jedi on this mission. Problem is, as is casually mentioned by Yoda and Mace Windu, there used to be a little bit of a flame between Padmé and Rush Clovis. Anakin is very upset by this. He has to pose as one of her pilots as they go on a mission to Cato Neimoidia, I believe it's Cato Neimoidia. And hilarity ensues as they have to get data from Rush Clovis, figure out what his ties are, in terms of the ongoing separatist plot. There is a poison attempt from Senator Dodd on Padmé, and there's a little bit of some heat from Rush as he tries to put the moves on Padmé the entire episode. And it's about trust, and it's about relationships having their bumpy roads, especially during war.
Jacob, go ahead, Point Rain.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So we see landing at Point Rain. Now, previously, I didn't actually realize that these two episodes were connected, but in Senate Spy, Padmé gets the schematics or the location and the proof of existence of this new secret high-tech weapons factory on Geonosis. So armed with this information, we have tons of Republic forces, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Rex and... Wait, is Rex in there? I'm not actually sure.
Rex and Cody.
Luminar
and Cody.
Kind of there.
There's at least a couple
Jet.
more named guys.
Jet as well, and Boyle and Waxer. A lot of a lot of familiar faces or names, I guess, in the case of the clones. And they all head in, and they have a plan. They're gonna attack from different angles and then meet up and blow up the generator. But as things tend to do, it goes south. We end up Obi-Wan crashes somehow he survives this high-speed gunship crash. But everyone's split up, and over the course of the episode, they have to kind of work together in their separate groups to come back together. And we end up with everyone kind of getting to where they were supposed to be. But we have some interesting themes along the way of trust again, from framed from a slightly different perspective. So yeah, we'll get into that, but that's basically the episode. It's pretty much the polar opposite of Senate Spy. There's that the Senate Spy was the only episode in the entirety of the Clone Wars, I believe, where there is not a single lightsaber ignited, not a single blaster bolt fired, and not a single explosion. In this episode, it is just non-stop lightsabers, blasters, and explosions. Non-stop.
And I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, that Senate Spy doesn't even have any active clones.
Yeah, no clones either. Very good point. And tons of clones in this episode. Think it's the only so once again, they're totally different.
Because Massacre doesn't have any clones.
Oh, that's a good point.
That's
okay,
true.
I guess finally there's Weapons Factory. In Weapons Factory, we see the shaky relationship of Anakin and Ahsoka. We see that they still kind of don't trust each other, even though we are we're 2 seasons into the show. And we see the contrast, the relationship of Luminara Unduli and her Padawan, Barriss Offee. Ahsoka and Barriss must work together to infiltrate and destroy a separatist droid factory that is controlled by Poggle the Lesser. And we see the personalities and styles of Ahsoka, who is way more brash and reckless and does not come in with a plan or prepared in the same way as Barriss, who's a very cookie cutter, clean, very proper, very orderly, very polite Padawan. We get to see those two styles clash.
For now.
Yeah, I was about to say, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into how that impacts Barriss later on, because I think it does. Anyway, and so they have to destroy the weapons factory, and later in the episode, they successfully destroyed the weapons factory, but Anakin and Luminara are kind of struggling to find them buried in all of the rubble, and it has some very important lessons about letting go and, surprise, surprise, trust. It's almost like that's a major theme in the Clone Wars.
Almost.
So yeah, let's get into the main meat of stuff, starting with Senate Spy. So usually we start with our fortune cookie because that guides the episode. So our fortune cookie for Senate Spy is: a true heart should never be doubted.
I found this a little generic, I guess. It didn't really give a ton of insight into what the episode was trying to say. So I'm gonna yield the floor, actually, to whoever else.
Are you just
has
a harsh
thoughts
judge of
about it.
fortune cookies, Jacob?
I guess I am. I keep ending up being dissatisfied with them.
I think I'm one more
time and time
easygoing
again.
with fortune cookies than you are.
I feel like we got spoiled. There were so many good ones at the beginning of season 1, and now it feels like they're kind of maybe struggling to come up with some good maxims to put in there.
But then
I don't know.
I think they take an upswing though. Like
They do
later
take
on in the
an
show, as
upswing.
it gets grim, like Mandalore
Yeah,
and
then it gets
all
really
the
good.
more Sith lore, like you get tons of good ones. But
We're-
I think that because there are fortune cookies where it's like every scene, it feels like, yes, there it is, there's the theme again. This one, it's sort of like it comes in like sort of like right at the end, like it's it's what it's saying is Anakin should have more faith in the woman he loves.
Yeah.
And that Anakin's inability to trust that other people won't disappoint him because he's been disappointed so much in life is part of his hindrance, and connects very heavily with the next two that we're going to talk about in terms of trust and all that. So accepting that people do have your best interest at heart, that they don't want to hurt you, because Anakin Skywalker's come up and everybody wants to hurt him his entire life. For the most part, he's a literal slave. He's only been disappointed and expected people either to leave him like Qui-Gon, so involuntarily, or even when they do take him on, it's with a little bit of chagrin, like Obi-Wan didn't want to train him, and that's always in the back of his mind. And I think that he's always expecting the other shoe to drop because he thought about this woman every day for 10 years, as he says, and now he has her and he gets to be with her, and I think he's always expecting to lose that situation. And so yeah, I think that's I think the fortune cookie like works at the end, but there is a lot of it's got some early Clone Wars slapstick of like, I'm gonna shake this ship, that way he has to fall out of his chair.
Yeah.
But I think
I'm not like in love with this fortune cookie, even though like I just said I'm more easygoing on. Like, yeah, it's fine. I don't really like. There's nothing really I'm against here, but it's not great. I don't think. Let me look at the other fortune cookies, but I don't really think. Yeah, I don't think any of these 3 fortune cookies are just like prime, very good ones. But they're all, in my opinion, fine. They're nothing like terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, to go back to what Alden said for a minute, the way that we see Anakin become so kind of possessive in this episode, I think is definitely foreshadowing. I think in Revenge of the Sith, how his fear of like being betrayed and his fear of being let down by people who he thinks are on his side, in this case that being Padmé, kind of leads him then to end up being more possessive, more aggressive, to like towards Clovis. Like he ends up kind of acting pretty boorish towards Padmé at times.
Yeah,
I feel like we see how that his experiences end up twisting his reality.
Yes.
So he ends up thinking that everyone's out to get him.
Right.
Like when he says, "You brought him here to kill me" in Revenge of the Sith.
Exactly.
It's actually gonna.
Like,
and it's like,
of course not, but
and it's a clouding, like you said, a distorting of reality and a clouding, because the entire story of Padmé is that she's nothing but dependable, nothing but the most trustworthy, like had the fate and governance of a whole planet on her shoulders as a child, and then served in the Senate after that. Like she's only ever been there for everyone. It's Padmé that says, you can stay here, I'm going to get Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones. She pushes to do this rescue mission. She's a ride or die type person. So for Anakin to get even the slightest whiff, like they don't even say that they were romantic. They were, but he makes these assumptions. He hears that they were close, and he's like, how close? Because he has to try to, and we'll get into this later with Ahsoka too. And like that Luminara rightfully calls him out for, are you ready to let go? Are you ready to let go of anything?
The lines that connect with me, it's from a little later in the episode when Anakin and Padmé are talking in the Senate, and I have a couple like logistical things with that. When Anakin says to Padmé, "I'm not gonna let you do it." The immediate line from Revenge of the Sith that popped into my head was that when Anakin screams at Obi-Wan, "You will not take her from me!" It's that like, it's very like, Anakin does see Padmé in this way as his, in a way that like it's from his slave past. It's from his. I think also it's a little bit from his Jedi upbringing as well, that he views Padmé as like kind of he has, as Jacob said earlier, this very possessive idea about who Padmé is and what she should do. He backtracks a little bit and he says, well, you weren't going to do it anyway, but it's still there. It still happens.
Yeah, and it's an extension of he's done these classic Star Wars like found family experience. I mean, he has his literal mother. He had Shmi, but then he gets Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Padmé, and Jar Jar and R2, and that was like such an upswing in his life. And then his experiences since then have been, his training, but also wartime. And he loses Qui-Gon and he loses Shmi. So at this point, he's trying to control every element that he can. Even with the best intentions, his inability to say that people are going to do things sometimes that you don't want them to do. He would rather her just always be in the apartment, always safe. Nothing can happen to her. So it's like he wants what's best for her, but he's not approaching it at all with a clear head.
Yeah, and we're going to see the exact same thing happen in Weapons Factory.
A little logistical problem, actually, I have. We go on about logistical problems. So, when they're arguing in the Senate, so I couldn't tell. I've watched this episode a couple times now. Is anyone in the Senate when they're talking? Like, it seems like, I think it's Padmé casting a vote on something. Is anyone in the Senate? If not, because, it could be not. Like, you would think, because I think this is also in, like, the United States with their government buildings, they have, like, cameras filming everything, right?
Yeah. You would think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I read somewhere in a reference book one time that the pods do have sound dampening. So I can only imagine that they're probably inside a bubble where they're talking can't get out to other people. There's something like 2,000. There's thousands of people in that chamber, and they all need to be talking to each other all the time.
The chamber doesn't sound noisy.
I think it makes sense that there would be some kind of technology. Yeah, there would be some kind of technology at most points so that you can have
I do wonder if
strategy
there's a certain
sessions.
element of like a general, General Skywalker, like a general's on site, like, this business like can't be recorded or something, some such other camouflage or, like you said, dampening and things that may have something to do with it. But it's also like, it's one of those animation conveniences, of there's always like, I think Star Wars Rebels does this a few times too on Lothal, where like they're talking very discreetly in a bar, and it's like it feels like everyone that lives in Lothal is in that bar, like they're all like right there. So
yeah, it was just a little weird to me because like, so nobody's hearing them while they're having this conversation that like basically could reveal their relationship to the entire galaxy. I mean, of course they didn't, because we know how Revenge of the Sith goes down and all that kind of stuff, but like it did seem this was actually something when we had Jared the Dark Jedi on a couple months ago, where we're like, there's so many hints in the Clone Wars, like there's so many times where the Jedi or the Republic or somebody should have seen that Anakin and Padmé were in a relationship that they just somehow didn't. It's shocking how many times.
like when Anakin, he has the close save, I think, in the in like Jedi Council strategy room. I don't know exactly where it is or when it is, but there Mace Windu says something along the lines of, Padmé and Rush Clovis, they were close, wink wink, and Anakin's like, wait, they were, and
I just didn't think.
And then everyone's like, why do you care? Why are you surprised? And he has to like backtrack and
because Yoda's like, why would you know anything like that anyway?
No,
yeah,
and it's like, so Yoda's not a fool. Like,
Yoda.
Yeah, that's actually the other thing. There are two lines from that scene that like seem to contradict each other. Personal matters for the senator they are. Know them, why would you? And then, like, 20 seconds later, trust you she does, Skywalker. So, you know that Padmé and Anakin trust each other, but you don't know why Anakin would care that he doesn't know about Rush Clovis. I mean, I think Yoda's smarter than that.
Maybe he just assumed that you know, I mean, it's Yoda. He's a Jedi, so I think he would probably be thinking along the lines of thinking from within this framework of living his entire 800-year life with like trying to banish attachments. Mm-hmm. So I think he would probably just assume, possibly without even thinking about it, that it's like, oh, just strictly professional. They're not friends. They just have like a professional rapport that works.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I could see it either that way, where maybe Yoda is like, oh, well, you know, we had Skywalker, was her security, before the war. Like her and Obi-Wan and Skywalker are our two favorite Jedi. It could be something like that, but it could also be Yoda. That first line of personal matters they are could sort of be Yoda being like, let me remind you without reminding you. And then he says, but there is trust. So Yoda does a lot of playing the game, because he's been around so much longer. Like Mace, Obi, and Anakin are all kind of like his sons in terms of, that. So he's got to tell them a little bit sort of what they need to hear or want to hear. And Yoda's been down this road before. Like people forget that, especially now with High Republic. Like we know sort of canonically, like some Jedi were flirting and hitting on each other a little bit back then. And Obi and Satine, like this ain't Yoda's first time around the block.
He doesn't he's not blindsided by this. By any means.
Also, quick note here: Mace Windu's reluctance talking about relationships is the most the best awkwardness I've ever seen. They were close. Like he's lived his entire life as like a monk, so he doesn't even really know how to talk about it. And it's clear I think he's really uncomfortable
trying to be kind of circumspect, but I don't know if it's working.
Yeah, I think that Windu also is like, I don't want to have to deal with Skywalker being moody or being off his game. Yeah, because he has they have such a rocky relationship.
Yeah.
That again, but if you thought that again, that brings up the question of how much did everyone else
know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I know it's an interesting. It's an interesting question.
Should we get on to Rush Clovis and his character?
Ooh, Rush Clovis.
I'm endlessly fascinated by, endlessly fascinated by his character. He's such an interesting and weird character. Just their first meeting in that diner when he says to Padmé, "You does that mean you want us to be friends again?" There's so much sexual tension in just that word. It's oh my god, he really never gave up on her.
Yeah, man, I hate Rush. But you're supposed to. It's effective. They create a guy that is the antithesis of Anakin. He's snooty. He comes from privilege. He's got, he's broad-shouldered Englishman. Space Englishman. Hints of sort of what Imperials would be like. Exactly. Yeah. And he's just so presumptuous. Goes to kiss her on the ship the second they sit down.
Yeah, he's leaning in, and she's leaning away, and he keeps leaning in. It's whoa.
Yeah. And then Anakin, of course,
he's just such a jerk.
Funny? It's a really funny moment. I gotta say, a lot of roles in the Clone Wars and Rebels, but a lot of the Clone Wars are double played. You have a lot of people playing a lot of different roles. Robin Atkin Downes is Rush Clovis. He's also Cham Syndulla and some other people. I'm a Gandai, for example. A bunch of other people, but I think Clovis is his best voiced character. Because it's just it's later on Cato Neimoidia. He is standing up to Lot Dodd on Cato Neimoidia, a Neimoidian on his home planet. This guy has guts. I mean, it doesn't really work out for him at the end of this episode, but even flash forward to season 6 where we see him again, he's taking charge of the banking clan and all that stuff. He's taking names.
Yeah, I think Rush Clovis is a pretty interesting character. I for me at least, I think even though he's not very likable at all and kind of by design, by the end of the episode, I almost feel bad for him with the way Anakin is kind of walking all over him and and we basically see Anakin acknowledge that if he doesn't get the chip back, which the hologram was on, that he could be killed for that. And Anakin basically says, "I don't care. I'm not giving you it back. I'm not giving it to you."
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel bad for him. He kind of ends up on Anakin's bad side, and regardless of like his crappy behavior, I don't know. You do end up feeling a bit bad for him.
Actually, it's a little bit of a contrast to that. I actually kind of a little bit, not exactly disagree with you, but I find it impressive. There are a couple times where I was totally expecting Anakin to lash out at Clovis in the episode, and he didn't. Like, when Clovis says, we need to save her because I love her, I thought Anakin was gonna, like, absolutely, like, flip his gears at Clovis when he said that. But no, he's like, if we want to do this, we gotta get that antidote back. When they're doing the whole thing with the chip and Anakin summoning the chip, I thought he was gonna totally mess that up. I thought he was totally, because they were talking in very, like, again, like romantic terms. They almost, we'll get to this a little bit later, but they were almost reminding me of Anakin and Padmé in Attack of the Clones with the language that was used. But Anakin totally keeps a cool head, and I'm not saying he's, like, completely fine this entire episode. He acts like a complete jerk to Rush at the end when he says, at least it's good to know you have a heart, Clovis. But there were a couple of circumstances that I thought Anakin was gonna absolutely lash out, and he didn't, which was interesting.
And I think that's like some of the richest stuff across all of Clone Wars, in that regard, is here, where there's the lingering specter of Revenge of the Sith the whole time that the show existed. We knew that it had to end at that point. So Dave Filoni and Gilroy and the whole team, they do a great job with having these moments where it does sort of have that undertone of, oh, he could snap at any second here, because we know the type of person that this war is turning him into. So I sort of see both of your points about Clovis feeling bad for him for having to deal with Anakin, but also knowing, we're looking at Clovis and we're like, buddy, you don't even know. Like, people have been cut down by this man. People have been stabbed by this man.
Not just men.
This is not
just men.
Yeah.
But the women.
Yeah.
And children too.
By Anakin,
women, children.
Look, I do want to say that by Anakin's standards, he behaved with the utmost composure. And
that is true.
If we compare what Anakin does, even to Clovis in later episodes, I think.
Yeah.
I think later on, because Clovis does come back, and there ends up being a similar Padmé Clovis dynamic.
Anakin
later on,
nearly kills Clovis in one of those episodes, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. I think he force chokes him maybe or something. I don't know. It gets really intense.
Yeah, I was a little bit like blending those together in my head, and I thought he was going to behave way more harshly to Clovis than he ended up doing it.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I don't know which episode that is, but I know what you're referring to.
And then we get to Cato Neimoidia, which is interesting. And I actually just had a thought about Cato Neimoidia, which is, I wish Obi-Wan went to Cato Neimoidia with Anakin for only one reason.
What?
So we could see Anakin rescue Obi-Wan on Cato Neimoidia, and then Obi-Wan will later claim it doesn't count.
Man, that seems like a bit of a missed opportunity. That would have been a lot of fun.
Because we never see that, do we? I don't think we ever see that in the Clone Wars. I don't think they ever go back to Cato Neimoidia.
I don't think they do. I think the next time we see Cato Neimoidia, and maybe the last time, is then in Revenge of the Sith with Plo Koon and Order 66.
Oh yeah, that is Cato Neimoidia.
Man, I do love the design of the place with the hanging bridge cities.
Me too.
I do wish we got to see a little bit more of that, but all in all, I don't have too much to say about it. It is so hilarious in my mind, so delicious, so petty almost, how Padmé completely turns that on Anakin and uses that phrase to spite him out in the beginning. We see Anakin say, dude, he comes first, I got a jet, and then Padmé's like, dude, he comes first, I gotta flirt with my ex.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's this whole idea of because the films are the films and there's limited script, real estate, and they have to get things done. You don't get sort of you get like the Shakespearean tragedy element of Anakin and Padme, but you don't really get the Shakespearean comedy element, which would be there with these two young people hiding in plain sight, their romance, all this stuff. They're frustrated. They're frustrated having to hide, having to speak in hushed tones and all this stuff. And they are young, and Anakin's only in his early 20s and since she's only in her mid 20s. And so they are, they're doing sort of what young people do. And they are, it builds and it adds to the, the Anakin that we see later that just wants to make things the way we want them to be.
Yeah, like the kind of idealism.
Yeah.
I also love how Padmé then flips the duty comes first on Rush.
Oh my god.
For me, I don't know. It does feel like actually that she kind of reaffirms that her loyalty to Anakin in that moment. Not maybe to Clovis, but maybe to us, really. I feel like that's a moment for the audience to see. Yeah, their relationship, despite what we might have seen earlier, was not really in jeopardy as much as we might have thought, because Padmé's, again, as we've said before, this extremely loyal person, this extremely, she has a great amount of loyalty to Anakin and to the Republic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
And of course they poison. The Neimoidians poison Padmé, and they have to make a mad dash to get that antidote. And then there's this great final line to this episode. I don't know if either of you picked up on this. I love this final line. Clovis, we need to talk. And it's just an army, like maybe 10 battle droids right there.
Yeah.
I was looking at I was looking at that scene. I'm like, interesting final line to that episode. It leaves it very open for when we can come back in season 6. For when we can come back to that arc. That final line.
Yeah. I think another thing I want to bring up while we're still on Senate Spy is how Padmé ends up apologizing at the end, which I think is pretty bad because, at least from my point of view, I think Anakin was pretty much in the wrong here.
Yes.
He was kind of acting out. And not only is this kind of bad for their relationship, this feeds into this overarching, frustrating theme that we see again and again in the Clone Wars of no matter what happens, Anakin ends up getting proven right. He ends up getting he ends up just having it reinforced that I'm right. Yeah. Everyone around me doesn't know what they're doing. They're holding me back. And we see this build up more and more, and kind of Chancellor Palpatine especially encourages this. And it kind of
enabling.
Yeah, it explodes in Revenge of the Sith, but yeah, enabling the Anakin's idea that he is just more knowledgeable, more powerful than everyone else. And again, that loops back to what we were talking about earlier about how that loops into the idea of everyone doesn't actually, everyone who's close to him doesn't actually care about him. Mm-hmm. And everyone who's close to him is actually maybe afraid of him, afraid of his power, and that kind of delusion that he develops.
And it plays into, what we'll see with, the next 2 episodes, and particularly with Luminara, that he can't absorb the lessons that are coming from his peers, about letting go, because he is so closed off and because he doesn't believe that they have his best interests at heart. So he's immediately undermining things in his head. Like his first reaction to her, and we'll get to it obviously in depth later, but his first reaction to her is, aha, see, you gave up on Barriss and Ahsoka. And she's like, dude, I'm always ready for, these situations. And he sees everything so narrow-mindedly because of this hubris and this feeling cut off.
I will also say about Anakin's, I think the Clone Wars is interesting in this regard, with especially Senate Spy and Weapons Factory, because Senate Spy is Anakin again. Anakin, Padmé apologizes to Anakin when really it should be Anakin apologizing, of course. But then, at the beginning of Weapons Factory, Anakin's just straight up rude to Ahsoka during her briefing in what I think should totally be called mansplaining in that moment. And there's nothing done about that. Absolutely nothing done. It's actually very a very both sides thing. It's the first thing Luminara says to Barriss about their relationship, going a little bit ahead, is they have a very I think there's rocky relationship, or they argue a lot or something like that. And I'm like, no, Anakin interrupted Ahsoka again and again. Ahsoka was pointing it out, and then he was getting angry for some reason.
Yeah.
Let's get to landing at Point Rain. Fortune cookie is believe in yourself, or no one else will. I think this is probably, in my opinion, the weakest of the three. But like, I can see it. It's like when the Republic starts out on Geonosis, and they're not doing well. But then they start gathering their forces. Then they like do a little morale boost, and then they're up and running, and they eventually break through the Separatist defenses and are ready to penetrate the weapons factory, as we'll see next episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's just it's a good middle episode. It's not one that I am like in love with, but I think that it is important for laying the groundwork, and also it's a great episode for fleshing out a little bit more a side, more peripheral Jedi with Ki and things like that. So
it's interesting for me because it does feel like the Senate Spy is this very deep political but also romantic episode, and Weapons Factory has these big deep themes in here, and landing at Point Rain is really just like, okay, so we're going back to Geonosis and we need a big battle there. Let's go. How many Geonosian starfighters do you have? Let's just throw in more. Go. Clone starfighters, everything. Clones, droids. It's just this big mess of a battle.
Yeah, like I said, it wouldn't be the Clone Wars if we didn't follow up the rom-com episode with just 20 minutes like of non-stop action. Like someone said, "Hey, I saw this trailer for the new Battlefront 2 video game. Let's take that and make it 20 minutes long."
Yeah,
that is pretty much this episode. Yeah. I will say, this is when we go to, I have quite a few logistical problems that we often try to figure out on the show. One of them is always ends up being personnel. This is a full-scale Republic raid on Geonosis. They got the usual suspects. They got Anakin, they got Obi-Wan, they got Ahsoka. They have Ki-Adi-Mundi, Luminara, and Barriss.
Mm-hmm.
Which, solid crew. They got some, but like, this is where the Clone Wars started.
Yeah.
Their Mace Windu's not there. Yoda's sitting on cushions,
He's been through a lot. He's earned that.
How it should have ended, attacking the clones. Sit on cushions, we must. I'm really doing all the work, aren't I? Yes. Yeah, and it just seems like maybe more Jedi? I mean, of course, the Clone War is happening all across the galaxy, but like this seems like...
Yeah, which is even alluded to with Yularen. Like, with the whole thing of like, he'll jeopardize other campaigns if the reinforcements are too heavy in terms of what he can supply and things like that. So it does a good job of showing like just how desperate like every little thing is, and like in true Star Wars fashion, like this is where it all began, and they showed up to Geonosis and they were, pretty much victorious. I mean, they didn't get Dooku that day, but they won the first battle of Geonosis. Just because you win once doesn't mean that a world is saved. Cocky. Yeah. And you didn't just save this place or win forever.
I feel like this episode was pretty dark because, I think like Ki-Adi-Mundi, for example, he says there's no such thing as luck, but then like 5 minutes later in the episode, he ends up saying once he's on the battlefield, with a little luck, we'll be able to meet up with them. And maybe this is a reach, but I think that it's kind of symbolic about how the Jedi are kind of a square peg in a round hole in this role that they're put into as generals, because their ideas and sayings completely break down on the battlefield. And I think that's kind of a symbol of that,
Oh, absolutely. And again, like, I know that I've been like echoing High Republic a lot, but just because I've so freshly read all of it, I think about Skier in the Marvel issue, the Marvel comics. We're talking to his Padawan Keeve Trennis, where she says a classic Jedi line to him. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. And he's like, yeah, being a Jedi Knight's just not about parroting wisdom. Yeah. And there's a lot of that happens in the Clone Wars, era. And that's a huge thing with Mace, obviously, in the movies, is we are keepers of the peace, not soldiers. Then the next movie,
someone at the end of the movie.
Yeah, behead someone. But then in the next movie, it's very, very, cleverly placed at the beginning. It's Palpatine telling Anakin he's too dangerous to be left alive before the do it. And then Mace saying it. And what that does in Anakin's mind, it's already clouded, where he's like, oh, you are the same, even though they're not. That sort of adds to those themes. So I love that you pointed that out, Jacob, of just sort of like how they can just be like, here's a nice thing that we've always been saying, and it's only just so they can feel good.
Yeah, and I think it goes even further, I think symbolizing how the Palpatine, by thrusting the Jedi front and center in the war, is really causing this breakdown of the Jedi ideals. And he talks about, I don't know if it's canon actually, but in the Book of Sith, this old red handbook that I have, it's really great. It's part of that series.
I have it around here somewhere.
He says he's basically gloating at one point about how I totally screwed the Jedi over by putting them in the war. I watched them fall apart. I watched them be demoralized. I watched their ideals and their morals disintegrate. And I think this is kind of a little example of that. Also, the way the Jedi, they're joking about how many kills each group got.
I was going to reference that.
Which is actually super brutal. A lot of those kills, at least for Ki-Adi-Mundi, were burning Geonosians alive. And that's the last thing you'd expect a Jedi to do, being like, oh, my squadron got 30 kills, haha.
They're acting like soldiers. Not that the clones are bad people necessarily, but that's a warrior's violence first mentality. That's definitely a Filoni Lord of the Rings thing. First of all,
it's not the Jedi. That's not what they are, but it's what they're like.
That still only counts as one. That whole thing, and that is so antithetical to what they are. You would think that if Qui-Gon could see that, he would throw up. He'd be disgusted by that behavior.
Obi-Wan even is disgusted.
Yeah.
I don't see how you could turn such a gruesome battle into a simple game or something like that, he says.
Yeah.
To your point, Alden, earlier about the whole parroting wisdom thing, it just reminded me of that very early Rebels episode. Do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? How am I supposed to do something if I don't try to do it? I don't know. Master Yoda sure said it a lot.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We get that example of and of course the no such thing as luck, mirroring Obi-Wan from New Hope. I like to just think that there's a little bowl filled with slips of paper at the temple, and it's just filled with the same.
Yeah, there's motivational posters all over the temple that just have a generic image
with loth cats on them.
Yeah, exactly.
And this just makes me tangentially, this just makes me love Kanan Jarrus even more, because he really did have the right idea when he said at the beginning of season 2 of Rebels, he's really conflicted. He's like, I don't want to be a soldier. This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't what I want to do. I don't know how much he knows maybe about the fall of the Jedi and the actual reasons behind that, but very, very interesting nonetheless.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the general battles, one of the things I love is I love how the Geonosians use their home turf to their advantage. They really they kind of use their planet and their resources as its own weapon, sort of kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We're gonna see this later on with a lot of the brain worms and the zombies and all of that stuff in the cave and all that, but. I also love, there's that great line from a clone, good thing those bugs can't aim, and then they get blown up by Geonosian starfighters. It's brutal, but it's so ironically funny.
And that's such a George thing too, of the organic life forms that in their territory will always succeed to a large degree, going back to Ewoks.
Yeah, I was about to say Ewoks, and then even Wookiees in
mm-hmm.
the Sith.
Oh yeah.
yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Actually, I gotta say, we've been a little bit critical of the animation in the beginning because they were still trying to figure out this whole animation thing at Lucasfilm. This is like a whole new engine they were building and all that kind of stuff. I gotta say, this episode was like one of the best animated episodes yet of the Clone Wars. I think.
I agree. You could tell that money went here, especially with Senate Spy coming beforehand. Like, yes, it's a great gag of Padme giving Rush Clovis a hug, and then not even gag, just a great visual, dropping the disc, and Anakin catches it and pulls it. But really, it's like she can't put it in her clothes because they can't move clothes. Like, she has her hands behind her back in a low cut dress. She can't just slide it with her lower back or wedge it anywhere because they can't move that. So they have to be creative about what they do.
It is. The clothes are so weird. That dress made me think, like, is there just like double-sided tape on the inside of it? Like, it looks like it's
the
just,
physics are ridiculous. Like, it's just, and like, obviously, like, I was never a fan of Jedi clone armor. It makes sense, obviously, and it's great for the themes of becoming warriors. But yeah, I was all about the later look for Anakin. I can't stand this Anakin look.
I think it is easier on them though, because they can go with the rigid pieces rather than the floppy fabric.
Yeah,
so much
for sure. That's why when season 7 rolled around and everything was flowy and he had his Revenge of the Sith hair, it was like, oh yeah.
I'm just still so disappointed that we didn't get to see the redone animation of Grievous for more than like half of it. It looked so good.
He looked great.
Menacing. We need to have like holograms and flashbacks to the Clone Wars in the Bad Batch, just so we can see more animated Grievous in the format.
I want to see my Dooku cape, man. I want to see Dooku with his cape. That move.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the sand, that's kind of another reason why I think the animation picked up here was it's a pretty easy planet to animate, and they could have all these wide sweeping shots, tons of different locations rendered in great detail, because they don't have to do the grass, the trees, some of these.
It's not a very varied planet. It's the classic Star Wars one-biome planet thing.
Yeah. Right. It's something that's always, I kind of love it and I kind of hate it about Star Wars, the one-biome planet, an entire planet covered in a desert, an entire planet covered in oceans.
Yeah.
That's why Alderaan had to be blown up, because it had multiple biomes. They're like, can't have that. It's gotta go. It's got mountains, oceans, plains. It's gotta go.
That's why Lord Corvax corrupted Mustafar in Vader Immortal, because he wasn't okay with having multiple biomes.
Like, people are like, oh, why didn't JJ specify that was Mustafar in Rise of Skywalker? Why didn't he put Mustafar on it? Because they told JJ this is Mustafar, and he's like, no, it's not. It has trees. He's like, no, Star Wars planets are one biome.
Obi-Wan's Lottie cruiser gets shot down, and they send who I'm now officially referring to as the odd couple, Boyle and Waxer, to get him. By the way, quick tangent, Alden. I know you're a fan, so I've now made this is the second movie trivia Schmodown reference I've made in this episode. The Usual Suspects and the Odd Couple.
Odd Couple. Yeah, yeah. I just thought that too, because I was watching backstage before I jumped on with you guys.
Nice. Yeah. So I just had to mention that. But Boyle and Waxer. I'm like 5 seconds before Waxer says this to himself. I'm like, why did they get all the fun missions? And then Waxer goes, why do we get all the fun missions? They rescue Obi-Wan and and they're all gonna regroup. And then they get to the barrier, which we got to talk about. Maybe one of the best Ahsoka lines of all time, I think. I told you about the barrier, and you said, "Don't worry, Snips. We won't be anywhere near that wall."
Yeah. I don't know what to make of that, but it's hilarious.
It just sums up their relationship in a lot of ways.
And flashing back, he says literally verbatim earlier in the episode, "Don't worry, Snips, we won't be anywhere near that wall." And watching it, knowing that Ahsoka's gonna say that, it's like, okay, Anakin. Okay, sure. And then we have that cave sequence with Ki-Adi-Mundi and his forces, where they, again, as Jacob referenced earlier, burn Geonosians.
Yep, that is brutal. That is absolutely brutal.
It is brutal.
You know what? Just a long list, just one instance in a long list of Ki-Adi-Mundi being out of line. All right, this guy, you've seen the post, the Reddit post that went viral that like lists all of his
Jacob loves that.
Yeah, all of his crimes.
He's the cause of the downfall of the Republic, basically. I love that post.
Ki-Adi-Mundi, every time someone could make a wrong decision, he did.
It's unfortunate.
I feel that way about Windu, but yeah, I know.
I think Mace Windu gets way too much hate. I love Mace Windu.
It's the citizen stuff. He did not have a good last moment in Clone Wars.
He didn't, and like the, you know, yes, was Ki-Adi-Mundi the person to bar Ahsoka from the Order officially? Yes, but was Mace Windu the deliverer of "You are on this council, we do not grant you the rank of master"? Yes, he was. So, so they get the they break through the lines, and the next episode, of course, is going to be them taking that factory.
Trivia time. So Obi-Wan's gunship.
Jacob reads the StarWars.com episode guide, so
I do like reading that. It's very fun. Obi-Wan's gunship has a Nexu on it with the words "Bad Kitty" and Orbesh, which was the ILM name for the Attack the Clones Nexu. So I love.
ILM called that one Bad Kitty. That's
great.
They
call it Bad Kitty.
That's great.
That's awesome. I would love, I love all the Star Wars working titles of the films and projects and stuff, like Huckleberry
Trixie,
and
Black Diamond.
Trixie, Black Diamond. So I would love to get some even more specific. Like they should make merch of those. I don't know why they never have.
Well, they made Blue Harvest merch.
Yeah, they need to do Space Bear.
I was about to mention a bear. I thought there was a bear one. Yeah.
I think,
right?
Yeah, I think Force Awakens was Avco.
Good stuff. Good working title. I guess let's get on to spoiler. We usually do our we usually rank these episodes within themselves. This is my favorite of the three, Weapons Factory. We got a fortune cookie of "No gift is more precious than," and I cannot believe I'm saying this again, trust. We come back
full circle
to trust again. Of course, we have Anakin at the beginning just completely interrupting Ahsoka, which I really do feel like is just so much mansplaining there. It's like, come on, she's trying to lead a briefing. Can you just let her?
Yeah, I think it's kind of going back to, I guess it's slightly different, but no, yeah, maybe this is different because in this Ahsoka's not really in danger, but Anakin still like feels pressure to kind of do everything himself and kind of take the world on his shoulders a little bit because everyone has let him down. So he needs to make sure that he can end up delivering a briefing, because I guess on some level, even though he I think intellectually he kind of knows that Ahsoka's up for this task, I think he doesn't fully feel that deep down.
Right. And it's, we go back to the beginning of their relationship. Like, why was Ahsoka assigned to Anakin? Why did Yoda do this? It was to try to teach him the lessons that he kind of refuses to learn in this episode. He doesn't fully absorb what Ahsoka and Luminara, what he can absorb from them. Being closed off to all of these themes, is sort of the downfall of his character. And it's sad to see because, you would think that, where does it come from? Where does that lack of understanding come from? Does it come from the fact that Obi-Wan never really wanted him, at the start? Why he's not able to process these themes of letting go? Because Ahsoka's, the tragic circle of their relationship in a lot of ways is that Ahsoka's aptitude, like her ability to do what she does in this episode, is because of his mentorship, but he can't trust that he's done a good enough job with her because he couldn't save Shmi, because he couldn't, it's always what he can't do.
Yeah. there is that line from the Clone Wars movie that actually, speaking of the beginning of their relationship, I always think of. I was thinking of in this case that is that Obi-Wan says to Anakin. Anakin says about Obi-Wan. He's the one who wanted the Padawan, and it comes back to like, yeah, this was never actually really something Anakin wanted.
Mm-hmm. It's an assignment.
He still has to adjust to this thing that was again kind of thrown on him, just like again he was thrown a little bit on Obi-Wan. Though even in that case, Obi-Wan took him. Obi-Wan, he still voluntarily gave Anakin training, even though the Council even didn't want him to. So we get to Luminara and Barriss, and I gotta just say this: I think such an underrated performance, Meredith Salinger as Barriss Offee. She is in every appearance she's in, even though I'm not a huge fan of Barriss just because of who she becomes. Mm. Such a great performance. Like, you can see there's that, I feel like Barriss was trained how a Jedi was supposed to be trained in the time of the fall of the Republic. Mm-hmm. There are some better things about her training than Ahsoka, sure, but we can still see the hubris in the fall of the Jedi in the way she was trained. Like, just the fact, jumping a little ahead, when she gets to the cave, she cuts that perfect square, perfect rectangle in the cave, and I'm like, that one thing that she did speaks volumes about her character.
She's so precise.
Yeah, she's so precise. When Anakin does it, or Obi-Wan, sloppy circle. No, Barriss perfect square, and then she calmly lifts the block out with the Force and puts it aside. And it's interesting to think about, like, I would have loved to be in the periods that we don't see Barriss as much, in between seasons 2 and 5 of the Clone Wars. I would have loved to be inside Barriss's head a little bit more, because I feel like there was a lot going on there, and I feel like that cookie-cutter Jedi that she was supposed to be is kind of, again, in season 5, what kind of led her astray a little bit.
And that's why I really, really wish that the Jedi of the Republic Mace Windu miniseries had done better, because I can only assume that the reason why that was the only one is because of sales. So I would, because that would have been a perfect opportunity. Like, of course, we all would love to read 5 issues about Kit Fisto just having a great time, but but like 5 issues about Barriss, underlining everything that would happen with her could be so rich.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for Filoni to bring her back, and so, like, I remember when Rebels was coming out, we were like, oh, this second sister, that's going to be Barriss. It's even a Mirial, and this is so oh wait, it's not Barriss.
No, it's not her. Yeah, and then like second sister, Fallen Order is going to be Barriss, and then
it's gonna happen. Mm-hmm. No, it's Trilogy, which was a great twist, just still not Barriss.
Still hasn't happened.
Speaking of Barriss's cookie cutterness, Luminara had her memorize a maze of 200 junctions. And Barriss did it. I mean, like, of course she did. I'm just like, for me to memorize 200 junctions of a maze would have to take is the Force assisting her? That's like my only thing, is like there's some Force-related memory trick she's using.
I think that there's it's a little bit of like that sort of attunement, and like you open yourself up to knowledge just like you open yourself up to power, but at the same time it's sort of like, how great is that thematically of the dedication of Barriss as a student to be so perfect and to be a model, like that what brings her corruption is this idea of like, we've lost our way. It sort of reminds me of like, well, I guess it's the other way around. When I saw Doctor Strange, what they end up doing with Mordo at the end of that movie reminded me of Barriss, where what separates Mordo from Stephen Strange at the end of that movie is Mordo thinking that Strange has abused magic and that what we've done here is wrong and everything, and like that sets him on his path toward villainy. It's just sad to see Barriss be such a successful Padawan in that way.
100%.
One of the things I love about Barriss is that, at least in my life, I feel like I know Barriss Offees. Mm-hmm. Like, there are a couple people who I'm like, oh yeah, I could totally see Barriss Offee in them. she's such an innately, I mean, not for me personally, but like you can see her in other people, like yes, you can see Anakin's in people, and like Obi-Wan's blah blah blah, but like Barriss specifically, there are so many people. There have been people in my life that I've seen like, oh yeah, that they seem like Barriss Offee. Or like, that sounds weird. What I meant to say was like, when I was watching this episode, I'm like, oh wait, this person seems like Barriss Offee. This person seems like, thinking back, that almost sounded really strange. But yeah. So Anakin and Luminara are distracting the droids above. And actually, here's a point I was thinking about the other day. I don't know if either of you, actually Jacob, you have, because I think we've played it together. Alden, have you played Disney Infinity by any chance?
Very briefly, but I enjoyed it. I was sad when they stopped making the figures and stuff.
I have all of them. Like right in front of me is my Xbox, which still actually has Disney Infinity, even though it's technically canceled.
Can you still play it? Does it just say this game is canceled or something? Like
no, I can still play it. You just can't get it anymore. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but anyway, my point being, in that game, they're also trying to destroy a droid factory, and I feel like between that game, which probably isn't canon, and this episode, which definitely is, the Republic should probably just put up a large sign on Geonosis that say, we are currently not accepting permits for droid factories here.
Yeah, honestly.
It's interesting to me. What are the implications of the fact that Geonosis is this massively important planet, apparently, with the Geonosians, Poggle the Lesser, and they end up kind of letting it go for whatever reason. It falls back into Separatist hands, even after the first Battle of Geonosis, which was, by all accounts, kind of a rout for the Republic.
And the lingering effects. I mean, by the time Ezra and Saw and the gang get there, we could see how even men like Krennic are still, abusing the planet.
And it's just become like, it's really sad to see, because the Geonosians, like, they kind of have like a lot of talent for manufacturing and stuff, and say what you want about them, but I think that's pretty cool. And it seemed like they were kind of looking for a way to kind of use that and gain some influence and some power, and that was totally they ended up just being totally taken advantage of twice by the Separatists and then by the Empire, even though it was, when you think about it, it was all Sidious, so it was pretty much just one continuous.
I play both sides, so I can. There's that meme. I think it was. Anyway, here's something I want to know. I'd love to see this. Probably all the Geonosians in this episode and in the previous episode get killed, but I want to know that like one of these Geonosians is Click Clack. I want to know that one of the Geonosians we see here is Click Clack.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
If that could be retconned and recanonized, that would be crazy.
Yeah.
The Geonosians have this new weapon that they're premiering against the Republic, called the Super Tank, which honestly, to me, when I saw this episode, I'm like, this is dumb. That's dumb. I mean, like, I don't know what it is for me. I just feel like, first of all, they call it impenetrable. No weapons they have will pierce this super tank. And then Barriss just cuts straight into it with her lightsaber, and it's like, okay, we're getting into the super tank. And I'm like, what happened to the impenetrable part? Maybe it was arrogance, but I don't know. I wasn't crazy about these super tanks. They didn't really do anything for me.
I mean, maybe it was a ray shield, so maybe the lightsabers could penetrate it, but maybe the
blaster fire
and the mass driver cannons from the ATTEs, those very clearly could not.
I mean, that's how I've always, if it's not Beskar, lightsabers is sort of the catch-all. Like, everything to me goes back to Phantom Menace. Like, steal the blast doors, and then Qui-Gon's like, yeah, I'll just melt it.
Yeah, like even like even Cortosis, it can be chipped and it can be brittle. So
yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
Speaking of, this is a complete aside. I just want to throw out there for your listeners. Fallen Order 2, I want to be able to do the pluggy thing and melt doors. All right? I'm sick of seeing doors.
Please.
Sick of seeing doors and I have to go around.
Please. Please, can we do that? I also, Fallen Order 2. When it comes, it's gonna be great, and we should be able to plug through doors like that.
Amen. Amen.
We do that. We can do that in. Actually, I was just thinking. You know what video game actually you can do that in? Disney Infinity.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I was gonna say Revenge of the Sith on PS2. I think you could do that.
Yeah, I don't have a PlayStation, so I would not know. Let's see. This is the interesting part of the episode because I feel like any other show that was not like a Star Wars show and didn't have Filoni and the writers at the helm would have totally have Barriss save the day and Ahsoka learn a lesson about obedience and doing what's right exactly the right way. But instead, Ahsoka at the end of this episode saves Barriss because Barriss, although she has a plan, she's prepared, she does everything perfectly. When things don't work out perfectly for her, she doesn't know what to do. I mean, she's not completely useless, but that's where Ahsoka's strength is, because she's learned from a master whose strength that also is.
Flexibility, and the ability to improvise and to allow the situation to guide you as much as you mold the situation.
Yeah.
Which is...
I think it's...
I was about to say, that sounds like a Qui-Gon thing, and then I realized, oh yeah, that is a Qui-Gon thing.
Yeah, I like oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and like the thing with the power cell and her connecting it to Anakin.
Right.
Yeah, it was a little trick I learned. And like we saw that a little bit with Anakin echoing the whole the thing he did way back. I don't know if you remember this, Jacob. In not way back. In in Children of the Force with the whole thing with the calculating where else Bane went with the ship.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's a mirroring of sort of that.
Yeah, I feel like it's really interesting how in this episode you can kind of it really kind of lays out maybe the benefits and maybe some of the drawbacks of both these approaches to being a Jedi and to how you instruct your Padawan. You know, we see Anakin have a lot of conflict with Ahsoka and a lot of kind of lack of trust maybe that should be there, and that ends up negatively affecting Ahsoka and her ability to carry out the mission. But then we also see Barriss is almost like in her quest to be the perfect Jedi, to be the detached and no attachments, very disciplined. She ends up almost giving up on Ahsoka and Barriss too quickly.
Right.
And she doesn't. It's just interesting how they end up both needing to learn how to have more faith in their apprentices, but for different reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I love about what you just said there, is going way back to the beginning of this episode. You know, what do we say about the universality of Star Wars? Is that Star Wars is always sort of like a meta narrative on a certain level and for life. And we talked about, and you mentioned, Jacob, like everyone attacks us from different angles. Like we see this all the time in Clone Wars. Like that's one of the beautiful things about Clone Wars and the vastness of so many characters, is that a lot of the times that lesson, that fortune cookie, that whatever, permeates, and it's the same thing, but because these are different people, they have to learn the different side of the coin, essentially. Yeah.
One of the things that kind of made me a little emotional at the end, Anakin says to Luminar, I refuse to let my Padawan die. And then I flashed to Twilight of the Apprentice. I won't leave you.
Then you will die.
That's ridiculous.
I typed in my notes, in all caps, I'm not crying. I swear, I'm not crying. You're crying. I'm not crying. It's that to be able to see all those years forward. In like that, how many years is that? Like 20 years in the future. They're the same, like biologically, they're the same two people, but so much has changed. But Ahsoka Ahsoka still has the same devotion for her master, but her master does not have the same devotion for her anymore because of the path he's gone down.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's flash into that. Yeah. So, that's all I have for Weapons Factory. So, I think I'm gonna. Should I? We usually like talk about which ones are our favorites, which ones, rank. Do a little mini ranking. Should I go first? Because I think I have mine.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think it's in it's backwards. So Weapons Factory is my favorite, then Landing at Point Rain, then Senate Spy for these three. Jacob Alden, any thoughts?
I liked all these episodes. I think my favorite, after having this discussion, is actually going to be Senate Spy, because it was just so different. As much as I absolutely love the action sequences, and that kind of feeds part of me that likes the explosions and the lightsabers and all that, I really gained a new appreciation for that episode. And then I would say my second favorite would probably be Landing at Point Rain, and then my third favorite would have been I'm blanking on Weapons Factory. We were talking about it for so long.
And of course, we get Jacob in mind. This is, of course, Jacob, your list is mine reversed.
I know, of course it is.
Pretty much us in a nutshell. I say my opinion on something, and Jacob said, yeah, that's cool. No.
Here's the opposite.
Definitely always like that.
I think I'm gonna go Weapons Factory first, then Senate Spy, then Point Rain.
Interesting. Yeah, I can totally see that. Next, we got some questions that we asked all of our guests.
I'm ready.
We were talking about this before we were recording. We used to call it a speed round, but no one answers this quickly, so we're gonna give up calling this a speed round. Jacob and I are gonna alternate questions. We got a good 13 questions here. So
Excited.
Let's do this. Who's your favorite Star Wars character?
I think, like probably most people, I will rattle off a few. I've got Han Solo, Sabine Wren, Kylo Ren, also Din Djarin, and I'll say Tebow the Ewok.
Ooh.
Oh, and also Moma Nadon. Who's just chilling on my desk at all times, I guess. I just pulled out the Power of the Force figure, people listening to the podcast. I love Ithorians, so like Moma, Mikhail Sutmani, Dokondar.
Oh, yeah. I just flashed to all of the Ithorians we encountered when we were doing Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah.
We talked for way longer than they were mandated to.
So many.
I'm not complaining. I love Ithorians. What is your favorite trilogy of Star Wars?
You guys. It's such a painful question to try to choose. Now, does it have to be trilogy of movies?
What are you suggesting?
Because I love the trilogies within the trilogies. I love the trilogies within the framework. Because if I could somehow... a hard trilogy, it's the originals. With the sequels underneath, I have love for all three. But original, sequels, prequels. But I love the trilogies that you can make, like the Ahsoka trilogy of of Clone Wars, then her book, then Rebels, or alternatively Clone Wars, Rebels, and Chapter 13, Mandalorian. Chapter 13. The Bo-Katan trilogy of Clone Wars, Rebels, Mando. The Ken Knapsack calls it the boot of the Empire. That era, that 19 years. We could see something like Bad Batch, Solo, Rogue One, or I would say
Rogue One.
Yeah, I would go Fallen Order, Solo, Rebels.
That's good.
So there's a lot of fun ones there.
There's
you got the Matt Magnovet's writing in there for Fallen Order and Rebels. So
yeah,
that lines up pretty nicely. Okay. So, I almost hate asking you this because of your response to the last question.
Sure.
What is your Star Wars movie ranking? If you don't have a movie ranking like firmly in your mind, top 5 or just favorite,
Allow me. Allow me to if I scroll.
He is prepared.
If I scroll through, I'm just looking for letterboxed here. Okay, Return of the Jedi, number 1.
Yo, Eli, that's yours too, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
The Last Jedi is number 2. Solo is number 3.
Interesting.
Interesting.
The Rise of Skywalker is number 4.
Yep, I agree. I mean,
Empire is 5.
No,
New Hope is 6. Force Awakens is 7. Attack of the Clones is 8, baby. Then Rogue One, Revenge of the Sith, Phantom Menace, Clone Wars theatrical movie.
I admire your audacity putting Rise of Skywalker 4th. There are only a few people, I feel like,
I like to live dangerously.
I have talked to on Star Wars Online who have Rise of Skywalker anywhere close to where I have it, and so it makes me happy.
Hell yeah, man. Fight the good fight.
Number 2 on my list. Yep. Jacob?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so what is your favorite piece of Star Wars media that's not a movie that you think people are missing out on and that you think gets overlooked?
Okay, well, I like that you qualified that question because if you stopped at not a movie, it's Rebels. But Rebels isn't really underappreciated, I don't think.
It's gotten an upsurge, I think, in the past couple of years of love for it. I'm so happy for that. It's so good.
It's like I have a religious love for that show. I think it's
incredible.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
I keep doing this to us.
Yeah, I will say this.
I keep inviting
I will tease that there will be a Ahch-To Radio Rebels spinoff of sorts happening soonish.
Is that the second show you've been teasing soon?
No. So there are going to be 3 shows. By the time of summer, there will be 3 shows with different hosts as well popping in. So I freaking love Rebels so much. Now, you said that is overlooked or underappreciated. I'm going to say, quite honestly, Star Wars Last Shot by Daniel Jose Older is one of my favorite Star Wars books, if not my favorite. It's that and Light of the Jedi right now are 2 of my favorites ever. I think that Last Shot is essential to understand Han in Force Awakens. Not that you need it, but like it's an essential deepening of his character. I think that he's immensely rich in it, as is Lando. It pays off so much of L3. It pays off the connection that he has with Kira and the trauma it had on him. It gives you insights into who he is as a father. You get to see Ben Solo as a toddler and sort of how the longing has already started in that relationship. It's so fun. It moves at a clip. It's got some of the best new canon characters like Peekpah, the Ewok Slicer. Ewok Slicer. Need I say more?
Yeah.
So I'm going with Last Shot.
Interesting choice. Okay, so everyone in Star Wars, I feel like everyone in the Star Wars fandom has their favorite background character. You know, the character that appears in a couple of shots,
right,
or is only ever seen like in flashbacks.
Right.
Alive in flashbacks is a pile of bones somewhere. I'm not talking about anybody.
Yeah.
But who is your favorite Star Wars background character?
Well, I kind of already mentioned Tebow the Ewok, so he's up there for me. You know, Ewok warrior. He also canonically wrote a letter to the other Ewok tribes that galvanized them to join Luke, Han, and Leia. He basically helped win the war. You know, he was the Alexander Hamilton of Ewoks, as I call him, for being able to write so passionately. Man, I also already mentioned
he wrote his way out.
He wrote his way out. He wrote all their way out. I also had mentioned Momo Nadon already, but I will say background characters that I love in other sections of Star Wars. There's a little buddy in Solo, and I had his name. Maybe was it you, Eli, that gave me his name, or was it someone else on Twitter? I was trying to figure out his name. He's like that little white chinchilla. that hangs out. His name starts with a Y, a W. His name starts with a W, and he was played by Warwick Davis, and that's how we figured out what his name was. I'll figure it out at some point when this episode comes out. I'll have found it and I'll tweet it out. I feel like this is what I was referencing, but he's one of my favorites. And then I will also say there's a lot of great small Jedi. I'm a big fan of Temple Guards overall. I mean, they're kind of background for a lot of it, so.
I feel like there's so much to unpack about the Temple Guards, and I would just want to get to know them more in some Star Wars project.
Yeah, a story about them, like sort of as a unified order, would be really interesting.
Okay, so what do you think is the coolest Star Wars species?
The Thorians, like I already said. I mean, Thorians and Ewoks are my two top favorite species. If I can't have either of those, I'm a big fan of Keldor, and I really like Miri Allens as well, with their inherent connection to the Force.
I'm so glad that I finally met a fellow Ithorian fan.
They're so great. They're phenomenal.
Me with the Rise of Skywalker. Okay. So everyone in Star Wars has their preferred viewing order. What's your preferred viewing order?
I'm gonna keep it simple and say chronological. I mean, like, I like some of the fancy ones. Like, there are some arguments to be made. But my most recent viewing was chronological. It's such a rich experience that way. I mean, by the time you get to Rise of Skywalker, after doing a nice run of all of it, you sort of, or most of it, because you may be not doing shows. Sometimes I sneak Mando in there now when I do it. But I think that Rise of Skywalker is such a strong sequel to Phantom Menace. I think those two, as the bookends, are so linked. So I like to do it that way, chronologically.
Very
Jacob?
nice. So, what Star Wars planet would you want to vacation on?
And let's extend this question a little bit. Answer it, and then answer it without using the planets of Naboo and Alderaan.
I wouldn't pick Naboo or Alderaan. I would totally pick. I would probably pick Coruscant or Hosnian Prime before, or Chandrila. I want a big city experience. I want to go to the Outlander Club. I want to be out there at Dex's Diner having a different menu item every day. People are always like, they want the picturesque outside. I'm not an outdoorsy guy. So give me that. I'll go to the one mountain peak that's left on Coruscant that they described in Light of the Jedi. But I will go to any of those city planets. If I had to pick an outdoorsy planet, one of them, I would go to Savareen because I want to try the Savareen brandy.
Ooh, the Sea Great brandy. Very nice.
Good stuff. So speaking of viewing orders, actually, you're talking about all these fancy viewing orders and all that stuff. Is there a weird viewing order, not chronological, not release, and also not machete? Other than those three, is there one that you've seen that you're like, wow, this is so cool?
Not one that someone else has come up with that I've seen. Like, I don't really know of too many that like are named like the machete one, but I will say that I did a backwards watch last year, and I watched 9 back to 1, and I gotta say it was weirdly profound in some ways. It's definitely not anything that I would do all the time or that I would show anybody, but it was interesting to sort of see the themes presented that way, because you sort of, especially for like Palpatine, I think that Palpatine, he's one of the biggest characters that benefits from watching all 9 together in a short amount of time, because you don't see it as he was gone and they brought him back. You see it all as one thing, like that Endor was sort of a setback, and then he has to. I've always compared Palpatine to Voldemort. Like, he's gone for a long time, but he is still the villain of that world.
Yeah. I like the whole what we see with Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker, where he's like that. He's almost a symbolic Palpatine. He's not even really Palpatine anymore. He's just the evil. He's just the evil that you need to play whack-a-mole with.
Yeah.
Which I love. Jacob.
Yeah. Okay. So what would your job be in the Star Wars universe? If you could live in the Star Wars universe, what would you want your job to be?
I would love to. I mean, everyone wants to be a Jedi. I would not be a good one, nor would I ever get in, or would I be able to deal with the training. I don't think. But my interests now in real life are sort of like filmmaking and radio and all that stuff. So I think I'd want to be some sort of broadcaster or like holovid, or like a holovid like documentarian. I think could be really cool.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before. That sounds very cool.
Okay, give me a sec. Okay, here we go. There are many moments in the Star Wars universe. I know you have an appreciation for them. I do as well. This is why I came up with this question that caused you to reflect back on George Lucas's quote from the behind the scenes of Episode 1. It's like poetry. They rhyme. Every stanza sort of rhymes with the last. Hopefully it'll work. What is your favorite "It's like poetry, it rhymes" example in any Star Wars? Doesn't have to be just the movies.
Oh, wow. I really like, in a lot of ways, the way that the most effective, Star Wars, right? Like it's supposed to be, it's blockbuster storytelling. At its heart, is so sensitive, but it's also so meticulous and steadfast. And I think that the fusion and sort of connection between the original Obi-Wan versus Vader duel in New Hope, which is it's slow like it was the 70s, like yeah, there's all of that, but the way that connects with Twin Suns, the way that connects with Twilight of the Apprentice, which is a little bit more fast paced, but then also Ahsoka in chapter 13 fighting Morgan Elsbeth, how that's such a Lady Snowblood sort of Tarantino by the water type meticulous battle. I think that seeing the way, this is not just like you asked sort of like for a poetry, a rhymes connection, and one thing across all of these things, the pace of combat, I think, works in sort of like a ripple effect where every time that it is a certain way for that era, it needs to be that way. Every visual piece of that storytelling and how the warriors act from Qui-Gon all the way down to Rey matters. But I think that, so that's sort of a broad answer, but like specifically, I love, and again, I credit Ken with this, and then I've talked about it. I love the idea, and Joseph Scrimshaw on Force Center, the idea of the twin lightsabers being the downfall of Palpatine, and how she needs both, and how she's blocking. And I think that Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker work together better than they contradict. And what they do is underline the Empire Strikes Back themes. That to me is poetry of Luke and Last Jedi pays off Dagobah of adventure, excitement. A Jedi doesn't seek these things. Wars not make one great. And he's able to do it on a grand level of mastery because he has immense power and experience of the Force projection. Rey, is still an apprentice. She's not quite at that level. Apprentice, you could argue by the third act of Skywalker, she's a knight. I think when she leaves Ahch-To and she is she shows up on Exegol, I think that Rey is a knight in that moment. And if she's not in that moment, she is by the Rise moment. That's a knighting, I think, in the same way that Kanan Jarrus Rise in his sort of vision in Rebels is his knighting. It's not official, but it is. I think that the Force projection on Crate and Rey blocking Palpatine's lightning with both Skywalker blades are effectively the same, because neither of them is an attack, but both of them win.
All the Rise of Skywalker, all the Last Jedi appreciation, just like love that stuff. I will live every day for that stuff.
Hell yeah.
And okay, Jacob, go ahead. What's your
okay? So
question?
If you could take, it's a bit of a cliche question, but if you could take one object from Star Wars or one force power from Star Wars into the real world, what would it be and why?
That's such an interesting question. Take an object or a force power. I mean, like, yeah, there's like the simple, like, comedic answers of like you would want like the telekinesis that comes with the force to to lift and move things. Objects is difficult, and I'm not really sure what I would want, but I feel like I would want the psychometry that is shown by Quinlan and Cal Kestis and even Rey with the Skywalker blade. Like, I would love to be able to, like, if I was visiting Italy, like I've been to Italy, I would love to go back there with force psychometry and like put my hand on like a statue or something and sort of be able to see some of that history, or put my hand on a guitar and hear all the songs that have played it, you know, that type of stuff would be cool, or all the songs that have been played on it.
Here's hoping that we get more of that in Fallen Order 2, because that was such a great aspect of Fallen Order 1.
Yeah, it was great.
The scene, I just replayed Fallen Order very, very recently, and yeah, I always try and do that if I can. Final question. I'm going to pull up a picture of a character.
Sure.
You're going to tell me how to pronounce her name.
Okay.
How you would pronounce her name.
I'm ready.
Okay, can you see this?
I do. I see her. Am I just going to go for it?
Go for it.
That is Zam Wessel.
Okay. Okay. We got the answer. That seems to be pretty common.
Who did I side with here?
Both of us, actually.
Okay. What do other people say?
So, in the video game Star Wars Bounty Hunter, which we covered, this was like July of last year.
Yeah.
Leanna Walsman, who is the actress who played Zam in Attack of the Clones and reprised her role for Bounty Hunters, introduced herself as, "Hi, I'm Zam Wessel."
What?
And this is my reaction as well.
I'm stunned.
And then we had fellow podcaster Devore from A Large View of the Force on, and he's like, "Yeah, I've always heard it as Wessel," and we're like, "What?"
Wrong. Wessel, Weasel, wrong. It's Wessel.
Yeah, literally every other guest we've had on besides Devore has said Wessel, and both of us as well.
I'm stunned here. I'm stunned. But you know what?
But
I also grew up saying that the Pokemon was called Arcanine, and then I found out it was Arcanine, and that ruined my life. So
no, but the funny part is So you know, of course, we got Wikipedia, the two tabs, the Legends and the Canon tab.
Mm-hmm.
Canon tab, no pronunciation provided. Legends tab, both are accepted. Wessel and Wessel are both accepted on the Legends Wikipedia tab, which is endlessly fascinating to me.
Rest in peace, Legends.
Yep. Anyway. So that's going to be it for this episode. Before we leave, Alden, where can we find you? Where can we find the stuff you do?
Yeah, you can find me personally at AD_Strider on Twitter, on Instagram at A.D.Strider. Do a couple podcasts now, and you can find me doing, of course, Ahch-To Radio, a Star Wars podcast where I interview guests. That is Ahch-To Radio. People that listen to In a Galaxy are going to know how to spell Ahch-To. I don't know why. Every time.
I should hope so.
And then you can find that on all your podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, all that good stuff. And then also, I'm one of the 3 hosts of the One and Done Film Club, a brand new film podcast where we take all your favorite franchises, we deliberate about them, each represent a movie of our choosing in that series, but only one gets into the club. Whichever movie we pick, we do a commentary on right there on the spot in the episode.
I just want to comment. I've listened to the first part of the first episode.
Yeah.
Haven't finished it yet, but I was very disappointed that nobody put Temple of Doom into the mix because it's my favorite Indiana Jones movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, see, that's a hot take.
That is a hot take. That's why
one.
I don't share it very often.
Spicy take. So yeah.
Okay. You can find Star Wars in a Galaxy at In a Galaxy Pod on Twitter, at Star Wars in a Galaxy on Instagram. You can find us, Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, anywhere you find your podcast, we'll be there. YouTube, Star Wars in a Galaxy. If you like this episode and this podcast, leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It really does help our visibility. Next episode, Jacob and I are going to be trucking along with Season 2 of Star Wars The Clone Wars. We're going to be reviewing the back half of the Geonosis arc, Legacy of Terror, and Brain Invaders. Until then, Anything else?
No.
I think that's it.
Jedi.
Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.